Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Sebbing. This is a Stashing with Stephanie video, so if you're a member of our Stashing with Stephanie club, you can get this pattern for free over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. If you're not, you can always sign up and then you get access to all our Stashing with Stephanie patterns. And you also are going to get 12 fat quarters every month for the price of 10, plus a coupon code to get another $10 off a $20 purchase to get additional yardage so you can make a whole quilt out of it. So really fun deal. And today's pattern, if you're not a member, you also can get it for a small fee. It's a digital download over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. It's called Divergence, and it's because this is all about contrast, and Divergence is a synonym of contrast, and that sounded better than contrast, so that's how we got the name. But anyway, I am using the English Garden line from Cotton & Steel, and I really love it. It is sweet but also modern at the same time, and it has these great contrasts. We've got the nice dark juxtaposed to the light, and then you can always pop the mediums in other places as well. And then it also has these really beautiful stripes, and you're going to see how I use those, and you're going to love it, and you're going to want to use them that way too. And I also have this great panel. It's not technically a panel. What it is it's darker on one half, and then on the other half it is just really light speckle. So I'm using a whole half yard of that plus fat quarters of the rest of the line. Now if you're in the club, you got 12 assorted fat quarters, so you can just make it a little smaller, or you can get some additional yardage of your favorite prints to help fill this out a little bit so you can create your own version of this as well. And I think it's gonna be really fun. And I'm also using, one other thing I want to point out that I'm using that is not in any of the stash and bundles because it's a little bit more expensive than regular quilting cotton, is they have these really fabulous cotton lawn prints. And there's 3 versions of this really beautiful butterfly. It's a little bit thinner than quilting cotton, but it's actually a higher quality fabric substrate, and the drape is really nice for garments, but you can also use it really successfully in quilts, and it's really pretty. It also has some metallic on there to make those butterfly wings pop. They have it in the pink and then the dark blue, and with that cream background. So I'm super excited about all these fabrics, and we're gonna create a nice scrappy version with no neutral background. It's just all gonna be scraps, so that'll be fun. It'll be a great stash buster if you're using this at home, or you can get the fabrics over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com while they last. Let's get started. You can get all the fabric requirements and cutting instructions for Divergence at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. Just download the pattern and you'll be ready to go. So step 1 is I have to put my 2 frame pieces around my center square. And the reason why Divergence works is we're constantly going to be working with contrast. So this is a medium value piece of fabric, and I'm putting the light value fabric next to it, and so you always want to make sure that you have something that is working with contrast with it. I use these fun stripes because it's going to create a fun secondary pattern when we get everything together. So I'm setting my seam up to sew a 1/4 inch stitch, just like you do for almost all quilting. I'm just going to arrange these right sides together, get my corners lined up, and then sew it to the top and bottom of my block. Now, if I weren't doing this for a video tutorial, I would chain piece all of these. And if you need to know what chain piecing is, we've got a full video on it in our beginner video tutorial series that you can watch on YouTube or at quiltaddictsanonymous.com/learn-to-quilt. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the other piece and I'm going to sew it to the other side. So I'm going to take that iron and set my seam, and then I'm going to press so that the seams are underneath the rectangle that I just sewed on for both the top and the bottom. So the next step isn't too hard. I just need to add now my longer rectangles to the sides of my block to create a square again. You could pin this if you wanted to, but your pieces should be just right about the same length as long as you've sewed an accurate 1/4 inch seam. So I'm just going to go ahead and line up my corners and sew like I normally would. Let's turn that around. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going to do the same thing, but this time we're going to set our seam again and press so that the seam is underneath that rectangle. So now we have to line up triangles with the middle of our block, and the easiest way to do that is to mark the middle of our block. And rather than doing it with a marking tool that might come back, I'm just going to mark it with my iron. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold my block in half, and once I'm sure that my edges are nice and lined up over here, I'm just going to take my iron and I'm going to give that a light press. I don't want to go too crazy with the pressing because I do want that to come out eventually so that we don't see it in our final block construction. But as you can see now, I've got a nice line here that I can follow and I can line up the point of my triangle with. So now with the right sides together, I can line the tip of my triangle up with that fold line that we pressed in. And once I've got that in line, I'm just going to go ahead and pinch the top and put a little pin in. And then I'm also going to go ahead and pin the corners. Then I'm going to repeat with the other side, and then it's time to sew. So now I'm going to join those using my 1/4 inch seam. Making sure I move my pins as I come to them. And I usually go ahead and sew all the way past that triangle because when I'm doing a lot of these, I'll just chain piece them through. For this one though, I'm just going to flip it around and sew down the other side because we're just doing one for the tutorial. So now it's time to press again. I'm going to go ahead and set that seam and then press so that my seam is underneath the large triangle we just sewed on. Do the same thing on the other side. You can already see here that the contrast is looking really nice. We've got our medium, our light, and now our dark. And so this whole block is going to be about having a lot of contrast. And we're going to keep switching up as we make them, depending on which one is going to be in which place. So that'll be really fun when the whole quilt is together. All right, so now I've got to trim this up before I can sew on the final triangles. For almost everything I make, my 6.5 ruler is large enough to trim, but for this block, it's kind of large that we're trimming. So I'm going to use my 12.5 inch Olfa Frosted for this one. We have these available at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up any inch line of the ruler with that seam that we sewed here, and then it should also be lined up at the bottom, and it should also be nice and even with the edges of your fabric here. So now that I've got that together, I'm going to go ahead and trim off my corners, set those to the side, we won't need them, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. Now I'm going to do the same thing we did before, where I'm going to fold everything up, And I'm going to get everything nice and lined up with my seams. So that way I can have the true center right here. And then I'm going to give it a little press with the iron. Nothing too crazy because I'm going to want to be able to press that out eventually. I just want it to be enough of a crease so that I can line up my pieces with it. So now I can line up the point of my triangle with that fold that I created, and then the edge with the top edge of the block. And I'm going to start by pinning the center in place, and then again at the corners. And your corners are going to go a little bit beyond, and that's okay, that's the way it's supposed to be. Still using a 1/4 inch seam, I'm going to go ahead and sew up and down the sides of the block. And just like before, if you were doing all your blocks at once, you could definitely chain piece this. We've got one last seam to set and then press again so that way that seam is underneath the triangle. Alright, so our block is together, but it's not quite done yet. We're going to trim this up a little bit to make sure it's nice and square, and these points are going to be just a 1/4 inch away from the seam allowance, so that way they're going to meet very prettily when we put our block together. So I'm going to trim this block down, and for the exact measurement you're going to want to refer to your pattern. And what I'm going to do is, if you've done this right, your point should be exactly a 1/4 inch away from the edge of your block once it's trimmed, and that way everything will be nice and neat when you put it together. So now I have two blocks side by side, and you can see how this contrast really helps to work with this block, because on this one we've got our dark, light, and medium, and we have our medium, light, and dark. So they really kind of play off of each other and look really nice together. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to flip these right sides together, and I'm going to show you how I pin them to get those points absolutely perfect. All right, so I can see where there's an X made in this seam allowance, and I'm going to put my pin in right below where that X is, and it should be coming out, and it is right at the tip of that point right there. And now I'm going to put it in the tip of this point. If you've watched any of my videos, you probably have seen this 2-pinning method. It makes for really, really accurate piecing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch this so that the pin is going straight up and down. Now I'm going to take a second pin, and I'm going to put that in from the side while holding the first pin going straight up and down. That makes sure that those points stay right on top of each other and that we don't have any issues when we put it together. Now I'm going to go ahead and put some pins in at the top and the bottom of the block just to make sure these corners stay nice and together. Now it's time to sew. So once I have everything positioned underneath, I go ahead and I pull the pin out, holding that first corner together. And still using that 1/4 inch seam, I'm going to go ahead and sew down. I'm going to slow down when I get to that point, and I'm going to aim to sew one needle width to the right of where that thread X was. That way I don't lose that point. Now I'm going to kind of straighten everything back out and sew the rest of that side down. Now I'm going to wait to actually press these until I've got my rows together, because I want to press all my even rows one way and all my odd rows the other way. That way my seams will nest really nicely. But I'm going to go ahead and take a peek at this, and oh, is that a good join. You can't ask for much better than that. Those points are coming together really nicely. They're almost perfectly together. I'm good with that. I'm really happy with the way this is looking. Can't wait to see the whole quilt finish and together. So I'm gonna go do that and then we'll be back. I really love how this quilt turned out. It is super cute, really soft and feminine, but still modern. And all of that contrast and color really helps make this design work. Your eye is constantly moving around the quilt. I really love how it turned out. I'm actually sending this one off. I'm not going to quilt it myself. I'm going to have a friend do it and use computerized quilting to get little butterflies in, so that way we can accentuate the butterflies that are in the fabric. And this one's probably going to go to my daughter, who's currently obsessed with butterflies once it's hung in the shop for a little while. Again, this fabric collection is English Garden by Rifle Paper Company for cotton and steel, and the pattern is called Divergence. If you're a Stashin' with Stephanie subscriber, you can download this pattern for free. Just check your email for the special coupon that lets you do that. If you're not, you can always join and become a Stashin' subscriber and get access to this and all the other free patterns that we have for that. Plus, you get a great deal on fabric every month. Otherwise, you can always just purchase the fabric separately while we have it, and you can download the pattern on our website, but there is a cost to that if you're not a Stashin' with Stephanie subscriber. Thanks again, and until next week, happy quilting!